Hey everyone, Destiny here from Pilates in Common, and today's video will be discussing the knee. So, living in San Francisco means living in an apartment, and I have neighbors above me, and I have a garage below me. So, that means if the neighbors above me drop something on the floor, I hear it. And that also means if somebody opens the garage below me, I also hear it. Why am I talking about my living situation in a video about the knee? Well, my living situation is the knee situation. So, just like my ceiling is the floor of my upstairs neighbor, the top of the knee is the bottom of the femur, and the top of the femur is part of the hip joint. And just as I can hear the garage below me, the bottom of the knee is created by the top of one of your shin bones. But the bottom of your shin bone creates the ankle joint, which sits on top of the bones in your feet. So when we talk about the knee, we can't talk about it in isolation. We have to consider the mobility or the lack thereof in both the foot and ankle and the hip. So we're going to explore that concept a little bit deeper today. Nicole is going to teach some Pilates exercises that will directly address the knee, but also she's going to teach to the upstairs neighbors or the hip, and then also the garage or the foot and the ankle, because both of those structures in the body affect the knee.
When someone comes in the studio, we often have people either work in a Pilates V or we say stand parallel, hip width apart. So Destiny, what usually happens when we say stand parallel, hip width apart? Most people get the parallel part, but woo, those are some big hips, right?
Reminds me of the SpongeBob dance.
Yeah, totally. So oftentimes people go way too wide. They think that their hips are out here. And what that's going to do is it's going to impact the force that the ground comes up through the foot, bypasses the knee, and goes up into the hip. So I've got a little skeleton here just to help us visualize how narrow your hips are. So you see these little sockets? So these are your hip sockets. So what I'm going to have you do, Destiny, is touch your hip socket. So if you kind of go where your thigh creases, right? And then go about 1 to 2 inches in, that's where your hip sockets are. So what we're going to look to is the knee, and we're going to align the knee underneath those hip sockets. Okay? Now, wherever your knees are, you're going to bring your feet directly underneath them. And that's going to be your version of hip width apart. And it's going to be different for everyone. We all have different sizes pelvises. So as long as we find the hip joint, we can help the knee align over the ankle. Okay, so that's step one. So we got hip width apart. And so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start to soften the knee 2 degrees. And as you soften the knee, I want you to just stay here for a second and see if you can feel the softening in the front of your ankle. So we're talking right here, okay? Then see if you can start to feel the softening in your hip socket. So you're doing like the babyest of a squat. It's like there's a really tall bar stool and you're sitting down on top of that stool. Now I'm going to have you just live here so that as you feel those joints soften, you have better awareness of that tripod of the foot, the big toe metatarsal, pinky toe, down the lateral edge and into the heel, okay? So go ahead and just straighten your legs. Boom, okay? Now what Destiny did as she straightened her legs is she pushed her knees back. Chin chin.
And I gave everyone a kiss.
Oh, good, good, that's good.
Also, I wish they made bar stools that tall.
I know. So Destiny is like 6'2". I'm 5'10", all right? So we're going to do this again. We're going to soften the knees 2 degrees. And you're going to stay there for a moment and notice if you allowed your ankle to soften and you allowed your hip to soften, okay? So that you can feel that tripod of the foot. Now I'm going to give you an image here. Just go ahead and take some easy breaths. I want you to imagine that this floor is getting ready to rise up. and you're going to gently press it down so it doesn't move. And as you start to press it down through the forefoot, through the heel, I want you to allow that to start to lift your pelvis up off of your knee. And what you might notice is some lower quads, some inner thighs, tractioning all the way up into the belly. You might even get some hamstrings pulling those femurs or those leg bones back into your glutes. That's the way, right?
Pretty crazy. Like, I don't even think about the belly, but if I think about pushing the floor away, I feel my belly rise.
Yeah, so that's a Pilates scoop, right? Ooh. Yeah. So let's do that a couple more times. So you're just going to think, I'm going to soften all my lower joints a couple degrees. Yeah, I need you just to soften your hip joint a little bit more. Exactly. Now stay here. Now I asked Destiny to do that because oftentimes people lead with the knees and they don't flex the hips. So she just needed a little bit more hip flexion. Now, as the ground is starting to rise up, I want you to press it down with the tripod and slowly let your pelvis float up. See if you can sense the activation through the arches, traveling up past the knee and up into the pelvis, right? And just feel that deep, right, abdominal contraction, the glutes, the low quads. One more time. We're going to soften. Notice
from the side. I think it's helpful.
Yeah, let's go it from the side. Yeah. Okay. So you're going to soften and just hang out. In the studio, we'll often ask you to move slow so that we can retrain our neuromuscular programming, right? If we go fast, so slowly start to push the ground away, and we don't have an idea of maybe how the lower quad muscles straight help pick up the patellar tendon to straighten the knee, we bypass it and we go into our faulty movement pattern. That is gorgeous. Awesome. Okay. So this is ideally how we would want to stand. You're feeling low back pain? Soften the knees a few degrees. Make sure your hips are relaxed. Make sure your ankles are flexed. Push the ground away. Reset. Cool. Okay. So I have Destiny lying down on her side, and her arm is extended above her head. Now, if this bums your shoulder out, don't suffer. I want you to just go ahead, bend your elbow. Maybe you have a yoga block or a pillow, and you can just kind of bring it by your side. Thanks, Destiny. But if this feels okay, go for it. Okay. So we're going to play a little game. I call it the 10, 20, 30 game. And what that's going to do is it's going to help us feel how the pelvis connects onto the top of the leg, which will directly impact how we receive force coming up through our lateral arch or the side of the foot. Okay, so we're going to be working on our side butt, our glute medius. We're going to start with straightening just the top leg. Bottom knee can be bent, and when you straighten it, Destiny, let's just bring the foot right underneath your sit bone or hip width apart. Okay. So in order to really affect the hip well so that we can kind of direct the knee in space, we need to make sure that our pelvis is aligned. So I'm going to go through a quick little checklist, and we're not going to spend too much time. It will be for another video. But what I want Destiny to do is to find a good sideline position for herself. So what I'm going to have her imagine is that her tailbone between her two sit bones was like a little tiny tail that was free and flopping in the breeze. And it could kind of live a little bit more behind her. So that if you were someone that liked to pinch your butt cheeks together, you would let that go, right? The next step is I want to make sure that the rest of her spine is stable. So I'm going to ask Destiny to take the top half of her pelvis and she's going to reach it away from her rib cage. And her leg's going to get longer. It's like standing into your foot a little bit better, right? Now, most people tend to have their pelvis way behind them. So we're going to touch the front of her pelvis. This is called your ASIS bone. If you just think about where your hip socket was, just kind of go a little bit up, those bony protrusions. I'm going to have her reach that forward and slightly down towards the end of the mat. And Destiny, when you do that, what does it feel like on your side?
Yeah, so it feels like the top half of my waist lengthens, and that I get the like hourglass shape back on the bottom waist.
Great.
So I feel like there's a little space in that bottom waist.
Cool. Did you feel the weight shift at all in the bottom leg or the bottom glute?
Yes. I felt the weight shift basically like out of my spine and into the pelvis itself.
Yeah. So a lot of people will say that they feel it in the center of their glute. They'll feel it like kind of at the top of their thigh or they're in their pelvis, and that's something that you want to be aware of. So we're going to try to maintain that weight there. And then I'm just going to have Destiny pick her leg up hip height, okay? And she's going to go through that little mental checklist again where she's got freedom in her tailbone. She's got the top of her pelvis reaching away from her rib cage, and she hasn't leaned back, so her ASIS bone is going forward in space. So this is the starting point. What we want, keep the pelvis stable. And so what you're going to do, Destiny, is you're going to reach through that heel, and you're just going to try to pick up your foot 10% and pause. Great. And then she's going to check in. She's like, oh my God, did I tuck my butt, right? Did I roll back? She's going to go through that checklist again. Yeah. So go through that mental checklist, again, pausing before moving. And she's going to reach a little bit further, and she's going to try to go up 20%. Now, some people have limitations in their hip, like lack of motion, range of motion. And so 20% might be a thought and a deep squeeze. So this 30% Destiny, go ahead and try to keep that pelvis super still and see if you can reach your leg up a little higher. Great. Now, Destiny has a little bit of a wibble wobble. She's trying to kind of lean back to find her strength. So I do want this ASIS bone to go forward in space. That's the way. And then what she's going to do from here is she's going to start to lower the 20%, pause, lower the 10%, pause, go to hip height. We're going to play one more time, and she's going to go through that mental checklist. Yeah, you're falling backwards. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you feel? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give her a little assistance. I'm going to take my hand on the back of her pelvis. You could do this with your own hand. So actually, Destiny, if you want to show it, right? You can kind of take your hand here and press forward, right, to help. Now I'll do it for you, Destiny, so that you can use your front hand to help stabilize your rib cage, right? So we're going to reach through the heel, and we're going to come up that 10%, and we're going to pause, and we're going to make sure for Destiny that she didn't roll back. Great. And then as we go to that 20% and hold, she's really going to start to feel muscles in her lateral hip. Oh, yes. Yeah. And so when we stand really well in our lateral arch of the foot, what it does is it helps stabilize the knee. It makes sure that it doesn't roll too far in by directing what's happening up here. We're going to go 30%. You don't have to like suffer. Great. And then we'll go down to the 10 or to the 20, pause, check in. Good job. Man. Good job. And then we're going to go down to the 10. Great. We're going to do some internal and external rotation of your femur. And the reason we're going to do that is so that we can understand the muscles in the hip that dictate the position of the knee. So if you have any sort of medial or lateral knee pain, the way that we can go about it is understanding where the tightness and weakness is, or the instability in the hip, okay? So we're gonna get into the position at that 10%. And Destiny, because, hold up, wait a minute. We wanna make sure that we're set up with the pelvis. So Destiny has the tendency to try to like tuck her butt, so pinch her butt cheeks together, and roll backwards. And so that's gonna mess with the alignment of how her femur sits in the center of her hip socket. So she'll start to compensate somewhere up the chain, right? Or she'll find that rotation from the knee when it needs to happen up here. So I'm going to give you, let's get you in your position. So you've got a little bit of tailbone. And then when she finds that like freedom in her tailbone, she leans backwards. So after she finds that exactly, she's taking this ASIS bone. It's like a little laser pointer down at the front of the mat. Okay, so here's the image, okay? I want you to imagine a really rusty like keyhole, and you want to get into the door, but it's so rusty that if you try to force it, it ain't going anywhere. So in this analogy, your hip socket is the rusty keyhole, and the key is going to be your femur. So you gotta finesse it in order to unlock it. You with me? So she's gonna focus on that stability in her pelvis, and she's gonna slowly begin to reach to pick up that leg to hip height, and then she's gonna keep going to that 10%, a little bit higher. Yes, great. And she's going to pause. We're going to take that key, top of her femur, and we're going to visualize first this key starting to turn in. And as she turns in, notice what happens below the leg. that internal rotation affects the internal rotation of the knee, right? Because the femur makes up the top of the knee joint. Now we're going to go really slow and we're going to start to turn. Now pause here for a second, my love. We want to make sure that it's not coming from the knee or foot. So visualize that key really high up into the hip and start to turn it external. Great. Now can you keep the top of your pelvis forward as you turn out? Yes, 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 yes. Nicely done.
So I could feel it in my knee, and I was like, oh, that's not good. Then
Right. So if
yeah.
you feel it in your knee and you don't feel your butt cheek on fire, right, then we want to check, well, what's happening up the chain. Okay. Now we're going to start to internally rotate. And so in this case, to create stability for the hip joint, you know, we have to pay attention to what the pelvis is doing in space so that the femur, and we're going to go external. We're just going to do this one more time. So 3 times.
To really concentrate to get it
to
initiate from
the
hip.
Exactly. So closing your eyes, starting to visualize that key slowly turning, trying to meet the resistance with gentle movement. Going slow, pausing is how we're going to start to feel. Yep. Now try not to let that pelvis sling backwards. There you go. You're going to reach through the top of your pelvis a little bit. There it is. And turn out. Oh, turn out for me. Great. All right. And then go ahead and lower yourself down. Okay. How'd we do?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like I always think about like Christmas lights, right? It's like this is on, and then I lose it, and I feel it in the knee, and then I get it back up here, and then I lose it. It's like this little
it's a back and forth.
Yeah.
And so that's normal.
Yeah.
And going slow using visualization helps you get the movement in the correct place. In this case, we are working our deep 6, which internally and externally rotate, right, the head of the femur, but we are also working more lateral hip as well. Let's do it on the other side. So go ahead and flip around. Okay. We'll start with our 10, 20, 30 game just to get us in the proper setup, and then we'll practice the keyhole leg. Okay. Now each side is different hip, different experience.
Yeah, and actually I've had surgery in both of my hips, and on this one they remodeled the head of the femur. So
okay, so this is going to be a little interesting. You might see less range, you might see weakness dropping down of the leg. Okay, so we can actually bring this foot forward. Also, if you're feeling a lot of tightness through here, more than welcome to play with the position of the leg. Some people like to have it a little further, picking it up onto the bottom foot so it's not so far down. We even have, I don't know if you want that, but we have also something to start here, if that helps.
Yeah, feels
okay.
good. Okay. And I can already, it's so interesting, I can feel that the tendency to tuck my butt or kind of hide my butt is less on this side already.
Yeah, it's kind of coming from your lower back, right? You're trying to extend your lower spine as you were trying to find that adjustment. Okay, so again, we've got our 2 sit bones, and then we're just kind of visualizing a little tail that's kind of flopping back. It's nothing exaggerating. It's not going to extend the spine or tighten those muscles. It's just going to release the butt cheeks. Okay, then the top of your pelvis is just gently going to start to reach away. Now, if you are one of those people that like to give 120% and you start to feel the weight come out of the ribs, dial it back like to 75%. And then exactly, dial it back and reach. Okay. The last thing is that she's going to take her ASIS bone and she's going to start to roll it forward. She might start to notice where the weight is in her bottom hip, and that can help her find and maintain the correct placement as we go along. Now, Destiny, what I want you to do is just take a nice breath in and a deep breath out. And I'm kind of imagining that your inhalation is starting to kind of pick up your spine into the top of your waist. And you might find on this side that you want to use a little bit more of your hand. The way that I kind of see it is if you flip your palm this way. So flip it this way, and just think of kind of gently pushing the mat away so that you can get like kind of this to come up. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so we're gonna start with that hip the hip height. Great, and you're just gonna pause. You're going to gently reach your pelvis, reach your heel. Yep, and pick it up another 10%, and hold. Now, for you, Destiny, is it okay if we kind of bring your leg back a little bit more? I feel like that might actually be a better place for you. Great. And then we're going to go up to that 20%. Great. And then we're going to hold here. We're going to breathe. We're going to make sure our pelvis is in the correct alignment. And I'm putting a fair amount of pressure forward in the back of her pelvis. And she's going to go up 30%. But remember, it might not be a physical movement. It might just be a deeper squeeze. So as her leg is getting higher, her femur is kind of rolling deeper into the socket. Now we're going to go down to that 20. Yes. Great. We're going to go down to the 10. We're going to go down towards hip height. You doing okay?
Yep.
All right. So we're going to play one more time. Okay. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of compression here. I don't want you to tuck your butt cheeks, but I do want you to find that same little scoop that you experienced. Yeah. So now we're going to come up. Okay. And we're going to play. Yeah. Take a nice breath in, hold. And then as you exhale, I want you to exhale completely as you take that leg up on the inhale. Nice. Good job. And then I don't need you to go 30%. I want it to feel like just a deeper squeeze. Yeah. You're going to go down.
I feel my bottom hip really
Yeah. And oftentimes that's true. People will feel the bottom hip because now it knows that it needs to help. It actually should be pressing down. Great. We're going to go to that 10%. You okay to do 3 rounds? Now we're going to think of that key. We're going to go internal. Great. Excellent. And then we're going to go external. Now I need you to slow down the external and internal, and I want you to see if you can close your eyes and imagine it happening from the very top of your femur. The knee, the foot will be passive, correct, in this exercise. Oftentimes people try to find rotation in the hip because of lack of mobility from the knee, not its job. And this is what this exercise is helping us understand, is the tightness and the weakness, and starting to get familiar, more than enough, go ahead to lower down, right, of how we control the angle of the knee. Where's the musculature? What does it feel like to do it? Okay, so I'm going to have you flip onto your stomach. You're going to get into a child's pose, and we're just going to open up the soles of the feet first because it's going to help with this next exercise. So you're in quadruped. You can have some weight forward, so kind of come off a little bit. Okay. So here's a little trick to get into ankle flexion. What I want you to do is I want you to hover your knee just so there's less weight on it, and I want you to pull it back towards your toes as if your shin got short. Good. Now place it down. So now she just flexed her ankle. Okay. She's going to do the same thing on the other side. She's going to hover the knee. She's going to pull it back. Great. Oftentimes we just like to bend the toes. We don't like to flex the ankle because it's tight. Now what I'm going to have you do, find a little bit of your belly support, and you're just going to allow your pelvis to shift back to a comfortable place on your feet. If you have bunions or arthritis, you might not get all the way there. That's totally fine. You can bring your hands a little closer to you if you'd like. You can even, if it's available, sit up onto your heels for a bigger stretch. We want to keep the heels pointing up towards your sit bones so that we're not destabilizing the ankle. We're just doing this as a little prep. Just going to take a couple breaths. This is a wicked stretch if you have tight ankles or plantar fascia on the sole of your foot. Right? She might even think of spreading her toes here so that she gets more real estate on that big toe, pinky toe. Oftentimes we'll avoid flexing the ankle or opening the sole of the foot by just shifting onto the toes. Yeah. And then she'll come off her feet, and let's do a counter stretch real quick. Just point your feet and then sit back on them. Now, if you have knee discomfort during these exercises, you would only shift back as far as you felt okay. You could also bring a yoga block underneath your pelvis, or you could roll up a towel and place it behind your knee to limit knee flexion. Both of those things will help. Okay. So now, feel like you stretched them a little bit? Okay. You're going to lie down on your stomach. Okay. So I'm going to call this prone knee straightening. It's not a Pilates exercise, but what it is it's an awareness tool to figure out how the foot helps turn on the hip to straighten the knee. Okay?
Should I stack my hands and be like this?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So a really good thing to do here is you can either grab a little pillow for your forehead, or you can stack your hands and rest your forehead on it.
Put your hair up.
Yeah, put your hair up. So I want you to just kind of assess, right, the weight in your pelvis. So you've got your ASIS bones and you've got your pubic bone. Some people press too much in the ASIS, some people do too much in the pubic bone. But what I want you to do, rest your legs completely. Yeah, you don't need it. Oh, so she's demonstrating. ASIS bones too much, right? Lower back tension. Great. Now we're going to do pubic bone too much, butt tuck, really flattening the lower back. Now relax. Great. And so we're just going to try to get the whole mass of your pelvis to be real heavy. And you're just going to breathe. And you're going to allow the pelvis to get heavier. And I have my hand on her sacrum right now, and I'm just asking it to, start to weight itself.
It feels similar to when I was on my side.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. Do you feel
like in order to feel the weight into my pelvis, I have to just sort of let my butt cheek spread.
Yeah, great. Yeah, she has to let her butt cheek spread.
Which is active.
Yeah, which is kind of active.
Yeah.
Do you know how it's active?
I mean, I just have to like really let them go. It's weird.
Yeah. And again, taking time in positions is so important because then we start to become aware of the muscle tension that we hold. And that muscle tension starts to become more like forefront in our awareness. And then we're like, oh, is this a thing that I do all the time? No wonder I have this tightness, right? No wonder I pinch my butt cheeks. Okay, so do you feel okay with this?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just spend time just to allow her back body to release. Okay, now I am going to give you a pillow for your forehead because what I'm going to have you do is stick your hands underneath your pelvis now.
Okay.
So you're going to do a little triangle. So palm of the hands is going to go on your ASIS bones, and then fingertips are going to go on your pubic bone. And then you can just rest your forehead on that. Great. Okay. And so this is now going to be a tool. You're going to find that same kind of release, right? The weight in the full pelvis, the weight in the ribs, right? So now your hands are going to be your teacher so that you can kind of start to sense if the weight falls too far into your ASIS bones, where she did that thing where she kind of arches her back, or if it goes too far in your pubic bone where she starts to tuck her butt and really flattens her lower spine. Okay. So what I'm going to have you do is try to maintain equal weight in your hands. Okay. Your knees are going to stay on the ground to start, and we're going to do just the left side. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you flex your left knee, keeping it on the ground. Yep. So go ahead and bring your foot up. So knee on the ground, flex your knee. Exactly right. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you relax a little bit and see if you can find that weight in both the lower half of your pelvis and your fingertips and the heel of the hand. Exactly right. Okay. She's going to flex her ankle, knees still down. And she's going to bring the ball of her foot onto the mat. Right? So you're in ankle flexion. Exactly. Great. Okay. So knee is staying down here. And what I'm going to have her do is think about a little laser beam shooting out of her heel. Now remember, weight doesn't shift in your pelvis.
Okay.
You're going to slowly start to reach through that heel. And I want you to see if as you do, you can sense a little bit of activation in your lower quad. Now pause here. Take a breath. You're going to reach through that heel until you feel maybe the knee start to pick up, which it is. Okay. What do you feel? Do you feel a little bit of that low quad activation, a deepening in the front of your ankle?
Yes, I feel my ankle flexor quite a bit. More than I actually feel my knee, but or the low quad, but I am starting to feel that now.
Okay.
Picking up the knee.
So then go ahead and lower the knee. Okay. So if your pinky toe could get some real estate on that ground, it doesn't need to, but just imagine. Yeah, you don't have to force it, girl. Just relax. If it could, right? It could get a little longer. We're going to try this again.
Okay.
So I'm going to have you start to think that not just the heel is reaching, but the whole kind of side of your shin, so the lateral edge
already better,
is going to start to reach. She's a little bit like her femur's a little twisted a little bit. And so as she's reaching, what I'm looking for is that the muscles right above your kneecap are going to start to pull up into your quad. You might feel it in your belly, you might not. You're also going to feel tension in the front of your ankle. And then as you do that, you might even feel a little bit of hamstring. Now we're going to lower the knee. We're going to try that one more time. So we're just going to do this 3 times, and this is our prep. Now, again, as we're doing this, this is an awareness for how standing in the feet, pause for a second, relax the knee for a little bit, just keep it right here, reach to the side. Right. Good. Yeah. So there's a tendency to kind of just move from the back of the knee on Destiny. It's totally normal for most people. That's why we're slowing it down.
Tall girl problems.
Tall girl problems. We're looking for low quad activation. Now, here's the next phase. Okay. You might not go anywhere.
Okay.
Totally fine. You want to keep the weight in your pelvis.
Okay.
Okay. I want you to imagine the weight staying the same, because it will, and that you're going to take a little bit of your toe weight off of the ground. Right. And you're going to pause, and you're not going to move that pelvis. And as you imagine maybe taking some toe weight off, and maybe, yes, they start to pick up, you're going to feel a little bit more hamstrings, but you're going to take the big toe off, not the pinky toe. There it is. Right. And then you're going to feel a little bit more up into glute. You feel that?
Yep.
So this is how we extend the hips. So when we get to the full part of like standing up from a squat, I want to feel front of leg with all of this back of hip.
Oh yeah, I got that.
Right? So that I'm not hyperextending the knee and thrusting my pelvis forward. Go ahead and release the knee. Okay? We're going to do this one more time. Okay?
What's nice also is I don't feel that. I feel like you could feel that in your low back. It's kind of cranky, but I don't. If I do it correctly.
Well, totally. And so that's part of the reason why we have our hands on the pelvis like this, is so that she can be aware. Like if she's feeling her back, you probably shifted the weight in your hands. So then you get to course correct. You'd be like, okay, next time I'm going to focus on the stability of my pelvis in my hands. And then I'm going to ask my heel to reach, or in this case, Destiny needs a little bit more of that lateral side to reach to pick up the knee. And then she's just going to start to pause, right? She's just going to check in, like nothing's moved in that pelvis. Maybe she's getting a little bit of low quad. And then for her body, as we're starting to pick up the foot, like it doesn't have to pick up, it just needs to unweight. She's going to think more big toe unweighting than outer toes. And that's going to give her a little bit more of that quad moving, or sorry, hamstring moving up into that glute max. Right? And she's just going to hold here for a second. She's going to breathe. As she's reaching through that leg, right? We've got all the stability in the pelvis. We've got the muscles in the front of the knee. We've got the back of the hamstrings traveling up into the glute. And then we're going to relax. And so this is what it feels like in the leg to straighten the knee. That's like all the pieces. A little harder to do to feel the belly, but that will start to happen as you're doing it from a standing position and pushing the ground away, right? So let's go to the other side. You can just relax this. Okay. Yep. Knee is down. She's going to check in with her pelvis, right? She's going to try to maintain the weight in her hands, and she's going to start with an energetic reach. And it's a slow reach with no objective to pick up the knee. It just happens. So as she's reaching, right? This side's different, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a little bit. How did it feel different for you?
This side feels like it's more automatic than my left side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
She's also standing in her foot quite differently. She's standing more through the center, so she has more weight distributed through the whole metatarsal pad. So, I mean, and a lot of us have shorter pinky toes, so it's never going to find the ground, but it's definitely going to search, and you can see that here in the outer edge of her foot. Great. And she's going to not focus about straightening the knees. She's going to reach to the heel like she's pushing that ground away. And she's looking for activation up the chain, up the front of the leg.
And on this side, I can feel it more up into like my pelvic floor.
Great. And then go ahead and lower down. And that's often true, is that as mechanics, we're going to do this one more time and hold it. As the mechanics of the knee improve, because we're standing in our foot better and we're more aware of how our pelvis and femur connect, so our hip joint, is that we start to like get more muscle tone moving up the chain. Okay, it starts kind of down around the joint that we're affecting, and then it starts to move around. So now what I want you to do, but don't shift that pelvis. So you're going to keep weight in the left side. Yeah, as you start to unweight. Yeah. And if you lift, great, but that's not the goal, right? You're maintaining stability here, and you're looking for activation up into, yes, the hip, the back of the hip. And then she's going to release the knee, bend it, and we're going to do one more. Okay. And you might be able to see this a little bit more on this side, the muscle activation. So as she starts to reach through, pause for a second. Yeah, reaching through the heel, she's gonna feel more toe bending. There's a little bit more tone in the top of her leg. Great. Now this tone is gonna work in partnership with the hamstring going up into the glute to start to unweight the foot. Right. And so I see a lot of quad, or I'm calling it quad, a lot of hamstrings moving up into that high glute to extend the hip. Exactly. And if she doesn't move her pelvis, and say you're doing a squat with weight, you would have to get that belly activation to help stabilize the pelvis so it doesn't get pushed forward by that strength here. Great. And then go ahead and lower down. You can point your foot. You're going to sit yourself back and you're going to come off your hands. Great. You can go back into a rest pose or whatever. Back where we started, right? We're going to find hip width apart. Find our hip sockets. We're going to line those knees underneath the hip. Wherever the knees live, the ankles go right underneath. That's your hip width apart. She's going to soften the knees a few degrees. So she's flexing the hip and the ankle. She's going to hang out here. Thinking of that last exercise where she was on her stomach, her pelvis was nice and stable, her knees were bent, her ankles were flexed. She's going to push the ground away, and she's going to see if she can feel the starting of that low quad. And as that low quad picks up, she's going to imagine that she's pushing the ground so much that she's going to find that same activation through the back of the leg up into the hip, and you're automatically going to get more belly as you do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, try it one more time. So you're just going down. So you soften everything. If you're going to go into like a full anatomical squat, she would keep softening the hips, right? And it should bring them back a little bit further. That's the way, right? And so when we're here, right, you can notice if your knees have fallen in or out. Remember that keyhole leg? Say that they fell in, you'd find a little bit of that extra, right? So you'd find a little bit of that external rotation from the hip. Then you might notice, oh, I've got more weight through the tripod of the foot. Now you're ripping and ready to go. You're going to press down, a little bit more heel for you, a little bit more heel. There it is. Yes. And she's going to get foot moving up the chain. And then if you could look behind her, her peach looks really nice. She's literally pulling her femurs back from the strength of her hamstrings and glutes. Good. And she has belly. Yay, good job.
And what's cool is that, so the first time we did it, you could almost see that as like an assessment, like a movement assessment.
Right.
Then we did some refined hip and ankle and knee work.
Right.
And then doing this again for, as almost like a reassessment, I feel so much stronger.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So if you're standing up and you also have like cranky knees, or then you start to feel it in your lower back, which we'll talk about in another video, like this little assessment or reassess and trying to find all the muscles that we just kind of activated and found can automatically help, right?
Yeah.
Everything higher up the chain too. Yeah, cool. All right, thanks.